Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to get into something really important.
Yeah, super important.
The long-term effects of childhood exposure to violence. We're going to look at a working paper
Right.
from the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland
Okay.
titled Childhood Exposure to Violence and Nurturing Relationships, the Long-Run Effects on Black Men.
It's a fascinating paper.
Yeah.
It paints a very sobering picture about the reality that young people face.
Yeah.
Over 25% of Black men in the U.S.
Wow.
have seen a shooting before they turn 12.
That's a huge number.
It is.
4 times the rate for white peers.
Yeah, it really highlights the
That-
different experiences kids are having in this country.
Exactly. And this study goes beyond just the statistics.
Yeah.
And looks at what are the long-term consequences
Right.
of being exposed to that violence that early.
Absolutely.
And they're pretty profound, right?
They are. The researchers found that Black men who saw shootings in childhood
Okay.
end up making 31% less. In terms of household earnings as adults,
That's huge.
and we're talking about a potential difference of $7,000 a year
Individually.
individually,
Yeah.
which you can imagine has a ripple effect on families and
Okay.
on communities.
Absolutely.
But what's important is the researchers didn't just find a correlation.
Okay.
They actually used some pretty robust techniques, statistical techniques,
Right.
to suggest that there's actually a causal link between witnessing violence.
So it's not just about growing up in a tough neighborhood or something like that.
Right.
It's like the actual experience of that violence.
Exactly.
All right.
The study challenges a lot of assumptions
Okay.
that people have about this.
Yeah.
They found that these negative effects that they
Yeah.
hold true,
Uh-huh.
regardless of the neighborhood,
Okay.
the socioeconomic status of the neighborhood,
Interesting.
and the impact of this violence.
Yeah.
It lasts even if somebody's never even been incarcerated.
Oh, wow.
So it's really pointing to something deeper,
Right.
something about the actual experience of seeing violence.
So what is it about seeing that violence
Yes.
that causes these long-term problems?
Well, the study points to this idea of toxic stress.
Okay.
You can imagine a child living in a constant state of fear
Right.
and uncertainty,
Yeah.
where violence is just a regular occurrence.
Right.
Their stress response system is basically always on.
Yeah.
And this prolonged exposure to these stressors
Yeah.
without enough support to cope
Right.
is what's called toxic stress.
Okay.
And it has a terrible impact on a developing brain.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
You're constantly on edge, worried about your safety.
Absolutely.
You're not going to be thinking about
Yeah.
school or, building healthy relationships.
Right. And this chronic state of toxic stress, it
Yeah.
just disrupts brain development,
Right.
hormones,
Wow.
the immune system.
That's a lot to carry.
It is. It's like carrying this heavy weight
Yeah.
that never goes away.
And it makes me think of Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Right.
He
right.
wrote about this in his memoir.
Yeah.
He talked about a significant part of his energy as a child
Right.
was spent just trying to stay safe.
Exactly.
All right.
And it makes you think,
Yeah,
this isn't just about numbers.
right. It's about real people.
It's about real lives being affected.
So is there anything we can do to help kids who've experienced this kind of trauma?
That's a great question.
Is there hope for them to overcome these challenges?
Well, that's where the research gets interesting.
Okay.
The impact is real,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be a life sentence.
Okay.
Strong, supportive relationships can actually protect against this toxic stress.
So the power of human connection.
Exactly.
All right. So how did the researchers actually measure this?
Well, they use data
Okay.
from a study called the NLS-Y97.
What's that?
It stands for the National Longitudinal Survey of Youth, 1997.
Okay.
And they looked at things like parental support, positive interactions with peers,
Yeah.
even the overall school climate, basically creating an environment where kids feel safe and supported.
Even though they've been exposed to these terrible things.
Yeah.
Right?
And the research backs that up.
Okay.
The study found that nurturing environments,
Yeah.
especially during adolescence,
Okay.
can really improve outcomes
Yeah.
for young people who have seen violence.
So it's not just this vague, feel-good thing.
No, it's measurable.
Right. There are measurable impacts.
Exactly.
Like income.
They found
Okay.
that high levels of nurturing could lead to an $11,000 increase
Wow.
in household earnings for those exposed to violence.
That's incredible.
It's a pretty big deal.
So this is starting to feel less like a deep dive
Yeah.
and more like a call to action.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty accurate assessment. These findings
Yeah.
have big implications for
Right.
how we design policies and intervention programs to support young people who have been through this kind of trauma.
So before we get into solutions,
Okay.
let's take a closer look at how the researchers actually arrived at these conclusions. You mentioned that they use some pretty robust statistical methods.
Yeah.
Can you break that down a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay.
One of the challenges in this type of research
Yeah.
is making sure you're really isolating the effect of witnessing the violence and not just seeing a correlation with other factors.
Yeah.
So they use something called propensity score matching.
Okay. What's that?
Well, it's a way of making sure you're creating groups that are as similar as possible, except for the one key difference, whether they were exposed to violence or not.
So you're kind of leveling the playing field a little bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And by doing that, the researchers are much more confident
Yeah.
that the differences they see in outcomes
Right.
are because of the violence and not something else.
Right.
Some other variable.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it really gives weight to these findings.
I'm curious. Did they look at this issue beyond just Black men?
That's a great question.
Okay.
And they actually did explore that.
Right.
What they found actually goes against some pretty harmful narratives that are out there about inherent differences between racial groups.
Okay.
You remember that big difference we talked about?
Right.
In exposure to violence?
That 4 times?
Exactly.
Right.
Despite that difference, they found that adolescent males of different racial groups were equally likely to engage in violence.
If they had been exposed.
Yes.
Okay.
So it wasn't about their race.
It's about the exposure.
It was about the exposure.
That's powerful.
It is. And they found this to be true.
Right.
Even after they accounted for things like family structure, income, education level.
So you take all those things into account.
Right.
And that link is still there.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's about environment and experience.
So we need to address those issues that contribute to violence in the first place.
Absolutely.
Things like poverty, lack of opportunity, racial discrimination.
All those factors play a part.
It's all interconnected.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
That's what we're going to get into next.
Okay.
We're going to explore some concrete ways to build these nurturing relationships and create environments where kids can really thrive.
Despite the challenges they've faced.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so we just talked about how early exposure to violence has a pretty big impact.
Yeah.
Particularly on Black men in the U.S.
Huge impact.
But the good news is this research also points to some pretty powerful ways to reduce those negative effects.
Yeah, we can't just focus on the problems, right?
Right.
You have to look for solutions.
Okay, so let's get practical.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
What are some programs that are out there that are working?
Well, one that comes to mind is the Boys and Girls Clubs of America.
Oh, yeah.
They've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
They do some really great work.
I've heard of those.
Providing a safe space for kids.
Right.
Especially after school.
Right.
And during the summer.
When they might otherwise be unsupervised.
Exactly. And vulnerable.
And they have a lot of different activities.
Fun.
Like sports and stuff.
Yeah, sports, arts.
Yeah.
Academic support.
Okay.
Mentoring.
It's really about giving them a place to go.
Right.
Where they can,
learn and grow and build those relationships that we talked about.
Exactly.
And the research really shows that these kinds of programs can really help kids.
So it's not just keeping them busy.
No, it's much more than that.
Right.
It's really about helping them thrive.
And what's amazing, the study actually looked at a cost-benefit analysis of this.
They did.
And it turns out that investing in programs like this actually has a huge economic benefit.
It does, because if you think about it.
Right.
If we can stop those negative outcomes.
Yeah, like lower earnings or incarceration.
It makes sense.
That's going to have a positive impact.
Absolutely.
So Boys and Girls Clubs is one.
Yeah.
Are there other programs?
Well, there's tons.
Like what?
Another great example is Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Okay.
They focus on mentoring.
Yeah. One-on-one.
One-on-one, exactly.
Which can be so powerful.
Especially for kids who have been through trauma.
That consistent support can really make a difference.
And the research shows that mentoring can have a huge impact.
On what kind of things?
I mean, everything.
They're like?
Academic achievement. Social skills. Reducing risky behavior.
So we've got after-school programs.
Yeah.
We've got mentoring. Anything else?
Well, there's also this idea of wraparound services.
What's that?
It's a pretty simple idea.
Okay.
It's a more holistic approach.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on just one need.
Right.
Wraparound services try to address a bunch of challenges.
It's like a one-stop shop.
Yeah, kind of.
For support.
They might include things like tutoring.
Okay.
Mental health counseling.
Right.
Even job training for the parents.
Wow, that's pretty comprehensive.
It really recognizes that everything is connected.
Is there a program that does that well?
There are, actually. A good example is Say Yes to Education.
Okay.
It's a nonprofit that works with whole communities to provide that kind of comprehensive support.
I've heard of them.
And they're seeing amazing results.
Yeah, they're expanding, right?
They are.
To other cities?
Yeah, their model has been shown to increase graduation rates and college enrollment.
So it's all about bringing everybody together.
It really takes a village to create the right environment.
Schools, organizations, families, businesses even.
Yeah.
But I mean, as good as these programs are, they can't fix everything.
No, they can only do so much.
Right, because we've got these deeper societal issues that we need to address.
That contribute to violence.
Like poverty, lack of opportunity, racial discrimination.
Absolutely.
So where do we even begin with that?
Well, there are a lot of good ideas out there.
Okay.
One that I like is universal early childhood education.
Okay.
Imagine if every kid had access to high-quality early learning.
Those early years are so important.
So important, right?
Yeah.
It could really help break those cycles of poverty and violence.
And there are other things too, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like affordable housing, more jobs,
training,
criminal justice reform.
All of that.
It's a big task.
It is, but it's not impossible.
All right, these are all good ideas.
And we know they can make a real difference.
So we've got a lot of work to do.
We do.
But at least we know where to start.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's the spirit.
So we've talked about the problem.
Yeah.
We've looked at some solutions.
We've explored a lot.
I want to bring it back to our listeners now.
Okay, good.
Like, what are some key takeaways from all this?
Yeah, what can they actually do?
How can they use this knowledge
with this information
to make a difference?
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have.
We've seen how bad childhood exposure to violence is.
Right, especially for Black men here in the U.S.
Right.
And we've seen how tied in it is with things like poverty and lack of opportunity.
But the good news is we've also seen some really promising ways.
Yeah, there's a lot we can do.
To help, right.
Absolutely.
So it's been quite a journey.
It has.
You know, we started out understanding the science behind this toxic stress.
Then we uncovered, you know, how big of a deal these nurturing relationships are.
How powerful they are.
And then we even talked about some real-world programs and policies.
Real-world solutions that can
help.
That are making a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a powerful conversation.
It's almost like we went from feeling kind of overwhelmed by the problem to feeling like
empowered.
Yeah, empowered to be a part of the solution.
I like that.
And that's how I want our listeners to feel too.
Yeah, me too.
Because this isn't just some academic thing.
No, this is real life.
You know, it's about real people's lives.
Absolutely.
So what are some key takeaways for everyone listening?
Well, I think the first one is pretty simple, but important.
Okay.
We need to understand that this trauma is real.
Right.
It's not something that people just get over.
So it's not like a cold.
No.
Right.
It really shapes them.
Okay.
How they see the world, how they act.
And it's so easy to just overlook that.
It is.
When we're thinking about these big, complex problems.
It feels so big.
Yeah.
But we have to remember it's about people.
Right. Individual human beings.
Each with their own story.
So what can we do?
Well, we can't all become therapists.
Right, right.
But we can all practice being compassionate.
Okay.
We can listen to people.
Right.
Without judging them.
Offer support.
Offer support, yeah.
Be empathetic.
Exactly.
And this goes beyond just, you know, our personal relationships.
Absolutely.
Like, we need to think about the bigger picture.
Right. We need to be advocating for policies that get at the root of this violence.
Oh.
We need to support organizations that are doing good work.
Yeah.
We need to speak out against injustice.
And it doesn't have to be this huge thing.
Right. It can be small.
Right.
The little things matter.
Like volunteering.
Yeah, volunteer at a youth program.
Donating to an organization.
Absolutely.
Just talking to someone.
Even just listening to someone can make a big difference.
It all adds up, right?
It does.
It's like that ripple effect.
Exactly. One small thing
can turn into something big.
It can spread.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
I
want to leave everyone with a challenge.
A call to action.
Yeah.
I like it.
What can you do?
Yeah, what can you do starting today?
Right now.
To create a safer, more supportive world.
For the young people in your life.
For young people everywhere.
What seed of change can you plant?
It can be anything.
Right.
Mentor a young person.
Yeah.
Donate your time.
Right.
Donate your money.
Okay.
Educate yourself, educate others.
There's so many ways to make a difference.
And the time to act is now.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
We hope you learned something.
We hope you feel empowered.
And remember, even when things feel really tough, there's always hope.
And we can build a better future together.
Absolutely.
Thanks again.